Welcome back, folks. I know it's been a while, so let's get right into it. Now, you might have seen videos of me working on some old MGs. That's an old customer of mine. I've been working on his stuff for several years. We've become good friends over that time, so I want to make a birthday gift for him. So he has one of those flat table lifts that you drive onto, and the issue with this is if you're half an inch too far to the left, the exhaust will get crushed over here, and if you're half an inch too far to the right, the fuel line will get crushed over here. So he has to be centered within a fraction of an inch driving onto this lift. So my gift is going to be a wireless camera that gets mounted low to the ground here and allows you, when you're driving in the car, you can look at your phone, which will show the feed from the camera, and you'll be able to see exactly how far off to the side your tires are. It should be much easier to center yourself on the lift. So here's the camera. It has an external antenna, which is very beneficial for what I'm trying to do with it. And then it comes with a very long lead here, little connector. We're going to cut all of this crap out. We're going to cut it right here. So it'll be the antenna and our power feed in. Now, when we're discussing power feed, obviously there's a positive and negative that the camera needs to work. Now, this third wire is called the reversing wire, and it's meant to hook up to the positive feed to your reverse lights. So you put the car in reverse, the app automatically opens on your phone. You take the car out of reverse, the app automatically closes. So while I do think that would be a nice little party trick to have, it's really not that important. And in my application, it's not going to be very beneficial because I would have to have a switch on this tripod that you would flip the switch to automatically open and flip the switch to close the app. Where it's like, you know, at that point you might as well just open the app instead of getting out and flipping switches, you know. I'm going to wire the camera up so it's always on and mount it to this tripod. So when he comes home, he can just stop outside the garage door, open the app, place his phone in the holder, and bam, you've got your live feed. Drive onto the lift, close your app, you're done. Here's how it comes from the factory. They have this weird cacophony of heat shrink over everything. I don't really understand why they do this weird thing where they leave a little tube of heat shrink sticking out as if, like, you know, it's literally just a channel for water to get in, but whatever. So, don't know why I put this whole stack here. We only need one of these. This is going to be the power supply that I'm using. To make things really easy on us, I got one of the ones that you just screw your bare wires into. Now you can see the cameras come with this big old harness and this weird little tiny 4-pin connector. I really don't need any of that. What we're doing here, we're going to mount this camera directly to the top of the tripod. We're going to separate the antenna, and then I'm just going to hardwire powering around directly to our 12-volt DC adapter. So this is a pretty straightforward project. Alright, so first we need to get the multiple layers of heat shrink off of this thing. Don't understand why they did that, but let's go ahead and get this crap out of here. Now this camera is meant to be mounted on the underside of a lip, like under the lip of the trunk. So if I go ahead and mount it on the platform like this, the image on the phone is going to be upside down. So real quick, I'm just going to flip this stand around. Alright, so now that I've flipped the mount around, you can see it's still not perfect, but this tripod has a tilt feature that'll allow us to get a horizontal image out of this. So when it comes to mounting, I'm just going to drill a couple pilot holes and use the original mounting screws that came with the camera. Come one, come all, step right up and take your guess. What size should I drill out the pilot hole? Starting off with 1/16, and we'll see how that treats us. Oh, that was pretty good. So I just want to get this screw as perpendicular to the mount as possible. And very slowly thread it in. And there you go. Now let's do the wiring. So most of my design choices I'm making with the intent of making this as versatile as possible. Now one of those points includes this, where you plug in the power supply. I'm going to have the bare wires mounted into these screw terminals. Okay, so to get around the fragility of this wire, I need to do some reinforcement. So here's the representation of the actual thing going on above you. We've got the red wire coming in, then here's the bare copper strands inside of the red wire, This blue line represents the piece of copper, and then there's the connector. So we're going to solder the fragile wire to the solid piece of copper, then we're going to encapsulate it in heat shrink. That should give us enough strain relief to prevent the wire from just snapping off inside the connector. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is get about 1/10 of a Rossmann's worth of flux to lay that into the connector. Lay this in together and crimp it shut. Alright, so now let's put that flux to work. Wet our tips, apply heat, and wait until the solder just sucks itself in. You can see it down here bubbling. Damn, now we're good. You want to apply some electronics cleaner, get rid of the flux. Our solder has flowed completely through. So now we want to size and cut this. And remember, we want like 1/2 inch to 1 inch of extra bare copper behind where we're soldering the small wire. Now it's time to encase this in some heat shrink. And there you go. Alright, so now that I've got both of these done, we can start working them into one cohesive unit. Okay, so that's the brace, and now I'm going to do much tighter wrap. Alright, now that we're all set, let's go ahead and lock this thing down. Perfect. So we're just going to mount the connector just there. I'm going to use some of this marine sealant. Great stuff. Just a dollop will permanently affix this. But before I do that, alright, so here's my test setup. When I cut this harness out of the circuit of that camera, I didn't realize by taking this out of the circuit, the camera received 12 times the voltage that it's supposed to. So this camera's pretty much roasty toasty. But luckily, through the magic of buying 2 of them, I get to do all of that work over again. And I'm just going to include this. I'm still going to mount this camera on that tripod the exact same way. And I've still separated the antenna from the wiring harness, except this time I've used a glue heat shrink to seal the antenna separate from the wires. I'm going to epoxy this to the side of the tripod along with the connector. Now to get power to this controller and by proxy the camera, I've just cut the end right off of the power adapter, and I'm just going to solder the wires from the power supply directly to the harness for the camera. And it's going to be a very short distance between the camera's mounting and where the connector that it plugs into is located. So I'm going to wrap this around a pen like this and then hit it with a heat gun to try and form it in that shape. So there we go. Good quality picture, seems to work. If he really wanted to, he could use it to make one of those old 90s music video shots where the camera comes flip-flopping in like that. Alright, so now that this is clearly working, I'm going to epoxy this regulator or attenuator or controller, whatever it is. I'm going to epoxy it to the leg here, and then I'm going to epoxy this connector to the side here. That way we can still maintain a little bit of swivel and a little bit of up and down action, and the whole thing will still be disconnectable. So here's my test setup. Got my low profile ramps. I'm going to use the camera to help guide me onto them. But that's not all. This camera has lots and lots of uses. I mean, right off the top of my head, you could use it to cut your own hair. You can do your own lineup. Probably more stuff than that, too. Winner takes all, folks. Oh, look at that. It passed quality checks. Whew. Thank goodness for that. 12 volts. Then, where the camera would be in circuit, less than 1 volt. But if I'm going to solder it afterwards, I pretty much exclusively use these old school ones.